All right, everybody, welcome back. This is, I guess, episode 2 of season 2. We'll call this. It's gonna get a little weird with MMA and NFL and all of that coming up in the fall. But it's the second UFC podcast we've done. Me and Kyle Mastoloni. K-Mass, what's up?
Not much, man. Actually excited for this week's card. It seemed like a pretty weak pay-per-view offering at first, but then when you actually dive deep, it's going to be fun. We got a few fights with super close lines, a lot of damn near pick'ems on here, so it's going to be fun to break down.
So, and we this week we actually have some like actual pick'ems, and it's weird because like UFC is one of those sports where it's like a minus 150, a plus 120. Like that's basically a pick'em. Like I know technically it's not, but it's like in football, that's like usually like a 2.5 point favorite is, minus 160, minus 170. In UFC, it's like a lot more of a pick'em. But like you said, we actually have legitimate, minus 110, minus 110 across the board for a couple fights tonight. Or not tonight, but for Saturday. Before we actually get into it, me and you have been talking about this. We brought this up in the Discord. Anybody who's not in our Discord, it's free Discord. Make sure you hop in. Links in my profile. We were talking about this since Gane's last fight was Volkov, right? So the night that Gane beat Volkov, I remember that I think I bet on Volkov, which I'd given up pretty early into that fight. It was pretty clear that unless Volkov landed something or somehow took him down and ended up in some crazy position, that he wasn't winning that fight. But I remember I said literally right after Gane won, that was when he faces one of these top guys, he's going to get knocked out if he doesn't start finishing these guys. And I know that there have been heavyweights in the past that have been able to decision their way, or at least, go 3, 4, 5 rounds in the heavyweight division. Guys, we think about like JDS, guys like Cain Velasquez, guys that were able to do that for a while. Even a guy like Stipe, who until Francis caught him last time, had really shown he was pretty much as durable as they can be at the heavyweight. I said that night, if Gane doesn't start knocking these guys out, when he faces these top guys, one of them's going to knock him out. And the first guy I said was Derek Lewis. I said, if Ngannou's not ready to fight and he fights Derek Lewis, if he doesn't, now I'm not saying he can't finish Derek Lewis, but Derek Lewis isn't fighting 25 minutes. Gane isn't lasting 25 minutes in there because, as we saw with Rosenstruck, he just didn't throw anything against Gane. We talked about this fight for a while. I mean, this is something that we've been expecting for a while, I think.
Yeah, and something that you said specifically in there all the way back then was give me Derek Lewis plus 200. And we have a much better line than plus 200 on Derek Lewis, at least on the money line. And then when you look at by knockout, I was seeing like plus 325, plus 330, which is awesome. And
yeah, so let's get into it, because you were saying that. I know we're both going to be on the same side of this first fight, the main event. But I think it's one of those where you can concede that. Well, let's get into it. UFC 265, Gane versus Lewis. Cyril Gane, 9-0, takes on Derek Lewis. Derek Lewis, obviously the more seasoned veteran, been in the game a lot longer. Cyril Gane, minus 380. Derek Lewis, plus 300. Gane's 9-0. I think that's the first thing you have to say. At the end of the day, a heavyweight being 9-0, it's not like he hasn't fought in the UFC for a while. He's got, I think 6 UFC fights. I think 6 of those wins are in the UFC. Before we get into actually analyzing the fight, that's where we got to start. Cyril Gane is 9-0 and deserves a chance to fight for at least an interim title.
Yeah, and I mean, he earned the shot. He beat Volkov, who's one of the best fighters in the world, thoroughly beat him by decision. I mean, landed 135 strikes, which is a hell of a lot for the heavyweight division. But the concern, and why we immediately said he will get knocked out by one of these top 3 guys, Volkov landed 115 strikes on him. Like, all it takes is one from Derek Lewis. We could get into Derek Lewis more specifically here, but I think that is the crux here. You mentioned Rosenstruck didn't throw anything, super timid. You would think if he would just throw a little bit, land some volume, he could have gotten Gane out of there. But there also is an elusiveness factor to it. But I mean, getting hit with 115 strikes, not going to cut it for me defensively.
And I think when it comes down to it, Derek Lewis is the kind of guy where you look at him. Well, first, let's get into this. The fight's in Houston. Derek Lewis never lost in Houston. It's 1-0 in Houston. So, obviously not a huge sample size, but hey, Derek Lewis is one of those guys. There are certain guys that are from certain cities, and it's just like, but there's certain guys that are from certain cities, and the city adapts them and loves them, and kind of like how Dublin did with McGregor. We've had a couple Boston guys, kind of how the Cali guys have done with Diaz, although I guess the Diaz brothers are now pretty much widely loved. But Derek Lewis is loved in Houston, and I think that makes a big difference coming off of a year like we've had, because there's going to be fans, they're going to be on Lewis's side, and Ciryl Gane hasn't minded, I'll say, the boos from the way he's been fighting for the most part. But this is for a title. This is with a lot more fans than there have been over the past, I don't know, two years or so, a year and a half, I guess. I mean, that's got to play into it, right? You don't think Ciryl Gane is going to change the way he fights because of the fans, but it's something you have to consider. Derek Lewis has been in this situation before.
Yeah, and Ciryl Gane, his 3 biggest fights against JDS, Rosenstrike, and Volkov haven't been in front of fans. There was nobody there. So even if everybody was shitting on him and going off on him on Twitter or whatever, he wasn't hearing it. So in this case, he's going to be booed in his walkout. He's going to be booed if he tries to stay away from Derek Lewis and not engage. So we'll see how he responds to it.
So, all right, let's go through Gane's wins, and then we'll get into Lewis's record over the guys that he's fought. So Gane, obviously these guys are, I don't want to say these guys don't have one-shot knockout power, because at heavyweight level, 95% of these guys, if they catch you clean in the right spot, you're going to get knocked out. That's just how they are. But there are certain guys like Derek Lewis that are on that next level of, I think he's pretty safely, like you said, a top 3 or worst top 4 heavyweight right now. And he's got that power that certain heavyweights just don't have. I think every heavyweight has a certain amount of power, if that makes sense. But if we go through Gane's wins, there really aren't. You go through Volkov, Rosenstruck absolutely has that one-shot power. I think when you talk about those guys, it's him, obviously, Ngannou's at the top of the list. I think, and then Derek Lewis and Rosenstruck are the 2 guys right below it, where it's like if they catch you clean, you're good luck trying to eat it. Rosenstruck just didn't throw anything, so he didn't really get tested as much. So I don't think you can look at that as much. But when you look at these other guys, these guys aren't knockout guys. JDS, Bozer, Dontel Mays, Rafael Pessoa. These guys don't knock you out. Obviously, JDS in his prime, had heavy hands but this was the end of JDS's career, basically. I think that's something you have to look at, right? These guys, they're just not of the power that Lewis has outside of Rosenstruck, who just didn't throw anything.
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't gotten tested by it. And also just famously, Derek Lewis doesn't throw a lot of volume out there either. But like you mentioned, he's on this whole nother stratosphere of power to where all it takes is one from him. I know it's corny to say it about a lot of people in the fight game, but with Derek Lewis, it is actually true, where I think DC mentioned it once, to where he blocked a shot from him, and he said it was still the hardest shot he's ever felt in his life. Like,
I don't know who. I remember hearing this on Rogan's podcast. I don't know if it was when he had Derek Lewis on or if he had somebody else and they were talking about Derek Lewis, but this was before the Curtis Blades fight. This might have been a year or 2 ago, where he said there are certain guys that when they catch you, they know how to catch you and when to catch you. And he brought up Derek Lewis. He said Ngannou's one of those guys that he'll just throw from anywhere at any time because he's got power like nobody has ever seen before. He's, basically this strength we've never seen. He said Derek Lewis has a little less power. He's got crazy amounts of power, but he knows when to hit you. He said he sees when you're coming in for a takedown. He talked about, I think it was the JDS fight, when he kind of faked that one of the body shots that hurt him and kind of tried to draw him in, to throw an uppercut. He said that, and then Derek Lewis's last fight, Curtis Blades went in for a takedown. Derek Lewis saw that coming before Curtis Blades thought about doing it and uppercutted him to another universe. I mean, that was crazy.
Yeah, it was absolutely nuts. I mean, he did get dominated in the first round, and everybody said what Curtis Blades needs to do, shoot for a takedown. But he shot and didn't set it up at all. So like you mentioned, Lewis saw it coming and just landed an uppercut that sent him in another stratosphere. I got killed by that fight. So
yeah, I think we all were kind of at the point where it's like, well, if Blades can take down Lewis, it was almost like this. It's almost a similar way that Gane has the victory. I think Gane's a better striker than Blades is, but I think Gane's path to victory is still similar to Blades, where in terms of they're not going to just try and stand and strike for 25 minutes. But I think when you're looking at it, it's weird because so Derek Lewis, he said this on Rogan's podcast. This is my favorite Derek Lewis quote ever. He said, because Rogan talked about how heavyweights get tired and how Derek Lewis isn't. There are some heavyweights that are in shape. Derek Lewis isn't. He's not hugely one of those grossly Roy Nelson kind of guys. Roy Nelson, all-time great. But there are heavyweights that are in good shape that can fight 25 minutes and then basically be like, all right, let's go spar again. Like, they can do it. Derek Lewis isn't one of those guys, and Rogan basically said that to him. And Derek Lewis's quote, he said, this is a quote from Derek Lewis. He said, I may get tired, but my power doesn't get tired. I think he knows how to fight like that. I think that's kind of, there are guys that when they get tired, they lose their power. But there are certain ways that, like Rogan had talked about before, it's not all about that one strike, although he can knock you out with the power. It's about knowing what you're going to do before you're going to do it and basically putting your face into his fist before he puts his fist into your face, I think.
Yeah, and it was the Volkov fight on that famous Khabib McGregor card that showed that more than anything. And his post-fight interview was what he was famous for out of that, but another one where he was getting dominated for 3 rounds, 4 minutes and about 45 seconds there. And then just perfectly lands a strike on Volkov and bang, fight's over. Derek Lewis is a hero, and gets a title fight out of it. So
let's go through Lewis's. He's got, I think, 3 losses in his past 10 fights, something like that. But these are guys that have bad losses. Derek Lewis doesn't have a bad loss on his record when you go through these guys. So let's go back through I think it's his last 10 fights is what I have here. We just talked about Curtis Blades, had that second round knockout of that uppercut. That was earlier this year in February. Alexei Oleinik finished him in the second round as well. That was August of last year. Latifi and Ivanov, those were, I believe, decisions. One at the beginning of last year, one at the end of 2019. But obviously 15, I'm pretty sure both those were 15 minutes. They weren't 25 minutes, which obviously a 3-round decision is, much different than a 5-round decision. Then he's got 2 losses in a row. JDS, he finished him, that was March of 2019, I believe. Yes. And yes, JDS had started that losing streak after this, but you could still argue this was still maybe not prime JDS, but still a good version of JDS, much better than obviously we'd seen recently. Then he obviously lost to Cormier by sub. Daniel Cormier, probably the second or third best heavyweight we've seen in the past 15 years, even from what he did at light heavyweight. And then you get back, he had that Volkov win that you talked about. Got dominated for most of the fight, but that doesn't matter because in heavyweights, like we talked about, all it takes is that one shot. He landed that shot in the 3rd round, knocked him out. He beat Francis Ngannou. I know they were both different fighters back when they fought. I think it was the end of 2017 or the beginning of 2018, whenever it was. But at the end of the day, Ngannou's the champion. He's got crazy power. Obviously, he's learned how to use it more. But Ngannou's always had power. It's, so a decision win over him shows that Lewis is at least somewhat able to avoid, the big strikes that he sees coming. Marcin Tybura, he finished the fight before that. And then the only other loss he has in the past 10 fights that he has, I think it's 10, Mark Hunt. And Mark Hunt is, I don't know, top 10 heavyweight of the past 20 years. I mean, Mark Hunt signified the walk-off KO. So he's got 3 losses. JDS, Daniel Cormier, Mark Hunt. I mean, Derek Lewis doesn't have a bad loss on the record.
No. And I was just going to say about that Ngannou fight, both were super gun-shy in that fight, scared of each other's power. But I mean, he did get the win. You're right. So he holds a win over the current champion, which is why it was easy to slot him in this spot. He would have gotten the shot at Ngannou if Ngannou was ready, and if Ngannou was ready right now, like they were trying to plan. So that's why we have an interim title here. But yeah, no bad loss on his record.
So, all right. So, I mean, we've kind of talked about it. I think everyone kind of knows where we're going with this. We'll put our official bets on here, but looks like you're siding with me. Even though Derek Lewis maybe not the most likely winner, I think he probably wins this maybe 35, 40% of the time, I think is probably fair to say. At plus 300, I think Derek Lewis is the bet. It sounds like you're with me.
100%.
What is Cyril Gane's path to victory?
Well, Cyril Gane's path to victory is staying away.
Besides not getting his head knocked off.
Yeah. I was going to say staying away, but also just to that point, using his jab from the outside, maybe trying to get even 1 or 2 takedowns might be pushing it with the way that we've seen Lewis land on guys that shoot. So I think his best path is to just stay away and get that jab pumping like he did against Rosenstrike.
So I remember, and I think Gane, this isn't necessarily something we've seen as much out of him, but I remember Cormier talking about this a while ago, saying that there were certain guys that obviously wrestlers want to get you to the ground, but you've got to get them to the ground in the right way. You can't just be sloppy against these guys, especially the guys that have power, where we talked about you just come in, they knock your head off, and you never get the takedown. Cormier talked about that there are certain guys that have proven that have that kind of uppercut or that knee or even that shoulder going forward that can stop a takedown. He said that the way that he liked to get them down, he would clinch, try and get on the back and try and take him down from there. I think even though we haven't seen as much of that from Ciryl Gane, I think that's probably a safer way to stay out of the range of his power, because the only way Lewis is knocking you out if you're on his back, trying to get him down, is either an elbow or if he somehow breaks and just throws a hook, right?
Yeah. And also Derek Lewis has shown the propensity to be able to break out from anywhere. I mean, he's gotten up from the ground almost whenever somebody took him down besides DC, and DC's just obviously a whole nother level of wrestling and ground game there. So he's shown a propensity to be able to get up, but that is probably the most likely path, because if you try to stand and jab with him, you're going to get hit at some point, and that's lights out for you.
And I do want to say this, we are recording this on Thursday, so obviously the weigh-ins tomorrow do make a difference. There are certain things that could change based on weigh-ins, guys making weight, missing weight, guys that look bad on the scale. That is something obviously to take account for. So make sure you're following us on Twitter, you're in the Discord, because there definitely could be things that change since we record this podcast, because UFC is one of those few sports where, there's like a weight cut where, that actually affects how you perform. You mentioned a Derek Lewis knockout prop. I'm seeing it right now right around plus 400. I think if you're going to bet Derek Lewis plus 300, you might as well take him plus 400 by knockout. I think that's his path to victory. I don't think he's going to even 3 rounds for, beat up on Ciryl Gane and win a decision that way. Is there any other props or anything else you saw in this fight? The only other thing that I saw was, as you talked about, Gane's path to victory may be to try and get him down. I think Gane, if he wins, can definitely win a decision if, for whatever reason, Lewis doesn't throw enough or if Gane just doesn't get hit at all. But Gane by sub, depending on which book you're at, plus 700, plus 1,000, so 7-1, 10-1. I think Gane, that's a realistic path to victory for him, is the sub.
Yeah, and that's a good price for it. I think, let me see what the decision prop is for Ciryl Gane. I don't think it's even worth betting necessarily.
Let's see. You could bet Gane by unanimous decision. That's 3-1. So that's, I think if he wins a decision, I do think it's probably a unanimous decision, although we are in Texas, so you never want to give him that. But it looks like Gane by decision is plus 200, somewhere around there, plus 175, plus 200, somewhere in that range, which may be worth it for sure. But I think if I'm betting this fight, I think you can put money on Lewis by knockout and Gane by sub. And if Gane wins a decision, or if Lewis wins a decision, or, Gane knocks him out, I think it's just something you live with.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
All right, let's get on to the co-main event. Jose Aldo, Pedro Munhoz, bantamweight fight. Jose Aldo, obviously, McGregor kind of changed his path in his I'll say career, but it's not like his career has been done since the McGregor fight. But before he fought Conor McGregor, Jose Aldo was arguably the best we've seen in his weight class. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, he was the best 145er. Now, of course, he's fighting at 135, but it did change the trajectory there, because then we had McGregor come in, and then we had Max Holloway, and he just never really reached the pinnacle again. He was champion, but it wasn't really a real title reign, I would say.
Yeah, and I think it's at the point where he's got what? He's got the losses to, let's go through this. He's got the win over, what was that, Chito Vera, right, in December of last year. That was a decision win that he's got. And then he's got 3 losses in a row before that. But once again, these guys that he's losing to, Peter Yan, who was the champion until he illegally
should
over
still be the
Sterling.
champion. But
No, he shouldn't be, because we talked about this, but it's like as a that's part of being a champion. We can go over this another time. That's part of being a champion, is like you have to understand the rules. You have to know what you can and can't do. He very clearly was told not to knee the guy, and he just kneed him straight in the head. Like, whatever. But then you go through the others. He's got Marlon Moraes and then Alexander Volkanovski. Once again, similar position that Peter Yan was in. I mean, these are bad losses for Jose Aldo. He's, what are your thoughts on him, I guess, at the stage of his career? Obviously not prime, but is there anything left in the tank?
Yeah, I mean, what concerns me is it's been consistently getting worse. He's consistently been getting worse each time out, with the exception of the Moraes fight. So, I mean, Petr Yan, he actually looked great in the first 2 rounds. I think actually won round 2 of that fight, but then just fell off a cliff from there. And then that Chito Vera fight wasn't necessarily impressive either. It was a super close decision. I mean, he won round 1, but Chito always loses round 1. It's just kind of his thing, I feel like. Then lost round 2 and took him down and kind of held him there for round 3. So that fight wasn't impressive at all to me, really. Didn't look great. And the thing is, he does tail off later in fights, and Pedro Munoz just keeps it on you the whole time. If you look at his output numbers, it's ridiculous.
So, all right, let's get into Munoz's past couple fights, and then we'll get into analyzing this fight as it stands. So Pedro Munoz, he's got a win over Jimmy Rivera. That was his last fight. That was the decision. Then he's got 2 losses before that, but once again, guys that, Frankie Edgar is a former lightweight champion. He's fought for the featherweight title, 3 times, 4 times, including the interim. He's fought for it a bunch. Aljamain Sterling, current champion, lost him in a decision, and then he obviously had that famous first-round knockout of Cody Garbrandt back in early of 2019. 2 wins, 2 losses, Munoz's last 4 fights, but as you talked about, he puts it on you. How do you see this fight going?
Yeah, he definitely puts you on you, and he arguably won that Frankie Edgar fight too. It was a close, greasy split decision there, but I personally have Munoz winning this fight. I think it's going to be a late finish as well. I see maybe a Munoz in round 3 if you have a number for that. But I definitely see Munoz winning this fight, and there is a chance of him putting it out late, but the line is also close enough to just take straight as well. He's -110, which is something that I love about this card.
I mean, at some point we're going to have to start disagreeing. Otherwise, this podcast isn't going to be any good. People are just going to be like, oh, you both gave us the same losers. Like, at least one of us has to give a couple of winners. Because I'm going to agree with you. I like Pedro Munoz here. I think there's 2 bets that I like. You could either go with, there's a bet, it is Munoz wins in the final round or by decision, +185. I think if you're just making one prop bet on this fight, you could do that. But I like the idea of just having a smaller bet on Pedro Munoz to win in round 3. Even I think you could do round 2 and round 3. I think towards the end of round 2 and then potentially in round 3 is when it could happen. It's a +1100 round 2, +16, +1800, depending on the book you use in round 3. Once again, those are 2 smaller bets you can make. Or if you want to make one prop bet, I think that one of the safer one would be in round 3 or by decision. And obviously, it's at a point +185 versus the -110. It does juice it up enough where I think it's worth it if that's the route you're going to go. But then obviously, the +11 or 1200 and the +16, 1800 in the later rounds obviously makes that worth it as well. So we are both on Pedro Munoz there, probably potentially a late finish. What is Jose Aldo's path to victory if he wins this fight?
Oof. I mean, his path to victory it's always to get those leg kicks going early and just kill somebody's legs. Jose Aldo was famous in the past for just pumping leg kicks out. He was one of the first guys to do it. I think that's his path to victory, and then hopefully grind out a decision and survive round 3. But not sure if he's going to be able to do that.
All right, let's get on to the next one. Michael Chiesa, Vicente Luque. Once again, another close fight. Depending on the book you have, I have it right now. Michael Chiesa plus 100, Vicente Luque minus 120. In the welterweight division, Michael Chiesa, one of those guys that maybe not always the most exciting fighter. Vicente Luque is kind of the opposite because Luque throws and he throws, and as we talked about Munoz putting it on you, when Luque decides that he's going to throw, he definitely puts it on you, like Munoz does. What are your thoughts on this one?
Classic striker versus grappler here, right? So I mean, they're both on a run right now. Luque 3-fight winning streak. Chiesa 4-fight. I would argue that Neil Magny is the best fighter either of them fought at this point. Tyron Woodley is just completely washed up, but
I think at the stage of their career that they fought him, yes. I do think out of all the fighters they've fought, RDA was probably the best out of this crew of fighters. But I think, yeah, like you said, at the time that they fought, I agree that I think Magny is the best of this group. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's what I mean off the recent win streaks as well, because Wonder Boy is the best fighter they've fought in totality.
Well,
and yeah, but yeah, I like Michael Chiesa in this spot. I hope we may disagree on this one so we could have a bit of an argument, but Luque's seen a propensity to getting taken down in the past, and I do in some fights in the past. And Michael Chiesa, I mean, he just gets on you. He's going to try to grapple him. He's going to try to make it a dull, boring grapple fest here. But I saved myself from an F-bomb there, but
yeah, because we definitely don't swear on this show.
No, not at all. But yeah, I got Michael Chiesa in this spot, either by submission or decision.
So, all right, let's go through their past couple fights, and then I'll give my thoughts on this fight, because we had mentioned a couple guys that they had fought. So Chiesa's past fights, January earlier of this year, Neil Magny won that decision. I think it was a fairly clear decision. I don't think there was any kind of argument for Chiesa to lose that. His fight before that was the Magny fight was the question, because he had fought RDA basically a year prior to that, hadn't fought in a year. How was he going to come back against a Neil Magny who has looked good recently? He won that Magny fight. So we talked about it before that RDA. That was a decision win that he had January a year before, so 2020. One of decision, I believe, against Diego Sanchez. That was the summer before RDA, so summer of 2019. Carlos Condit, he submitted. He had that Kimura. I don't want to say out of nowhere, but there just wasn't a Kimura, and then there was a Kimura. I don't really know where it came from, but that's kind of Chiesa and what he can do on the ground to you. Even though he's not a huge submission guy, he's good enough on the ground to be able to kind of pull those subs out from wherever. That was a round 2 Kimura that he had on Condit, I believe. And then Chiesa's last loss, that was the summer of 2018, back when Anthony Pettis was actually Anthony Showtime Pettis. Speaking of weird subs, that was like that triangle armbar submission. Anthony Pettis is another one of those guys that, like, if you put your head in a weird spot, he's gonna just find a way to choke you out. So those are Chiesa's past fights.
Definitely, and something to mention about that Pettis fight was that was his last fight at lightweight. That was Chiesa's last fight at lightweight, and then he moved up to 170, and he's been 4-0 at 170.
And I think the question was, because he had never really been tested in terms of getting hit, especially down a weight class, was the question of coming up to welterweight. If he was going to get hit, could he take some of these hits? Obviously, he hasn't taken anything huge, but he's proven he's, obviously big enough to fight at the welterweight division. Obviously, that's where Vicente Luque has been basically, I think, for his entire career. Was he maybe up a division at some point? I don't know. But he's been a welterweight for the majority of his career, if not all his career. We talked about Tyron Woodley. That was the round 1 sub that he had of Woodley. Brandy Brown, he finished. That was a second round knockout. Nico Price, that was a doctor stoppage, I think, in the middle of the 3rd round, right? Was that when he had that cut above? Was that when Nico had that cut above his eye? I think that's when that was. I can't remember. I think that's when that was. But that was a doctor stoppage round 3. And then Luque's last loss was, as we talked about, probably the best fighter out of this crew of people that they fought. Stephen Thompson, that was a decision loss back in like around Thanksgiving of 2019. So Luque's been on a 3-fight win streak as well. You said you like Chiesa, so I'm going to make you give Luque's path to victory.
Luque's path to victory is keeping the fight standing, defending a few takedowns, and just unloading on him when they break up.
So I'm not gonna say I'm gonna pussy out, but I'm gonna kind of pussy out a little bit. Instead of just having an outright winner on here, I have two prop bets. They're both plus 250, and I think you can bet them both because obviously at plus 250, if you bet the same amount on both, if one of them hits, you profit. And for those that follow my betting card, that's kind of the way that I do it. Is I always tell people maximize your profits, minimize your losses. So if you think that there are really two endings to this fight, and they're both plus 200 or more, then to me, I don't know why you wouldn't bet them both. So the two props that I like, I have Chiesa by decision plus 250 and Luque inside the distance plus 250. I think both of those, that if Luque wins, it's inside the distance. I think if Chiesa wins, yes, there's a chance he submits Luque if he gets in. But I think Chiesa is more likely to kind of lay on him and try and avoid that Luque power for 3 rounds. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, God damn it, we agree again. I feel like I like both of those bets. I do think Michael Chiesa by decision is the more likely outcome. I'll be on, I don't really take props much. I'll be on the Chiesa side, and his best path to victory is decision. And the only way that doesn't happen is if we go by sub, because Chiesa's not knocking Luque out. That's for damn sure.
Weirder shit has happened, especially in Texas. But all right, let's get to the next fight. Tecia Torres minus 130, Angela Hill plus 110. This is in the women's straw weight division. The first thing I'll say is that it was back in 2015, obviously a long time ago. Tecia Torres does have a win over Angela Hill. It's a decision win back in 2015, obviously a long time ago. Plenty of stuff has changed since then, but I think that is worth mentioning. Here, before I go into anything, what are your initial thoughts on this fight? This is, I think, one that probably is almost likely going to the decision.
100%. I mean, what's the to go the distance? What's the over? Let me check here.
It was like minus 280, minus 300, something like that.
Yeah, my book steams up some stuff a little bit. The over on my book is plus 410 over 2.5. So that's that tells
fight
you
goes to decision. I'm seeing minus 325 to minus 400 depending on your book.
Yeah, that tells you exactly where this fight is going. I don't think any of us really expect a finish here. I mean, Tecia Torres finished Sam Hughes the last time out, but Sam Hughes just isn't nearly the same quality of opponent as Angela Hill or nearly as durable for that matter.
So, all right, let's go through some of their past fights. As you just mentioned, Tecia Torres fought Sam Hughes. That was on Sam Hughes was on short notice. I believe that was her first UFC fight. Am I wrong with that? I think that might have been her first UFC fight.
Yes, that was.
Okay, so that was the doctor stoppage. I think that was at the end of round 1. Tecia Torres won that. Then she's got a decision win to against Brianna Van Buren, and then she's got some losses. But as we've talked about before, none of these losses are awful. Obviously, Marina Rodriguez isn't a great loss, but Marina Rodriguez isn't, a bottom of the division kind of person. But then she has got a loss to Weili Zhang. She's got a loss to Joanna J. I will never get her name right. Joanna Jacek. And that was one of those where, like, Joanna was the best in the world, I would say at that point. Obviously, she was champion, but I think that was at a point where it's like, this Tecia Torres girl, she might be like a top 3 girl in this division. I mean, she went 5 rounds with Joanna and really made that a fight. And then the loss before that was Jessica Andrade. They're not bad losses, but they're still losses, right?
Yeah, I was just gonna say Joanna was a 3-round fight, but
was it a 3-round fight?
Yeah, but still went three rounds with the best fighter in the world, and Joanna was getting a few finishes here and there back then, so just off volume alone. But yeah, it was still a 4-fight losing streak, but it was against some of the best in the division. And don't hate on Marina Rodriguez there. She's on a nice little 2-fight win streak. But yeah.
I think that's kind of the point. Is Marina Rodriguez is that perfect, like, she's not a Sam Hughes or Brianna Van Buren, but she's not a Weili Zhang. She wasn't a Joanna Jacek of where she was in her career. I think Marina Rodriguez is kind of that middle ground kind of fighter in this division. When you look at Angela Hill, she's got a win over Ashley Yoder. That was her past fight. That was a decision. We saw what Ashley Yoder just did, so obviously maybe not the most impressive win we've ever seen. And then 2 losses before that. Once again, neither really scrubs of the past 3 fights of the losses she has. She got a loss to Michelle Waterson, and she got a loss to Claudia Gadelha. Tecia Torres is minus 130. Angela Hill is plus 110. Who do you like here, Cal?
I like super close fight, could go either way. It could be a greasy split, and you know how Houston does, you know how Texas does those with their judging. But I'm leaning the Tisha Torres side. Not very confident about it either way, but definitely leaning towards Tisha Torres here.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'll bet this outright as well, but I do agree that I would lean Tisha Torres. And then Torres by decision is plus 100. I think if you're going to bet Torres at minus 130, something minus 140, somewhere in that range, I think by decision, as we talked about, plus 100 is the way to go. I can even look.
Either girl you're betting on. If you're on the Angela Hill side, you might as well just take it by decision. And watch this. This is going to be a crazy finish after I say this now, completely jinxing it. But either side betting by decision feels safe.
Yeah, or you could minus 105 if you wanted to bet it. That's Torres wins in the final round or by decision. So if you're going to juice it up 15 points, I think that's a way you can do that as well if you're going to bet Tisha Torres. All right, bantamweight fight next. Casey Kenny minus 120. Song Yadong plus 100. Another fight that is a virtual toss-up. Casey Kenny's coming off that split decision loss to Dominic Cruz. A lot of people thought that he won that fight, me included. Nathaniel Wood, that was a unanimous decision win before that. Ali Alatang, that unanimous decision before that. And then he subbed Luis Smolka. I believe that was in round 1. That was 4 fights ago. Song Yadong, he's coming off that decision loss to Kyler Phillips, where he just refused to throw strikes. When he threw strikes, he looked good, but he just refused to throw strikes. He's got a win over Marlon Vera before that. And then he had that draw with Cody Stamann because he threw that illegal knee in the first, I think it was in the first round, and somehow won the other 2 rounds. So that was a draw with Cody Stamann. So Yadong is 1-1 his last 3. Casey Kenny is 3-1, but that one, a questionable one, but it was his last fight. How do you see this fight going?
Yeah, and I mean, Song Yadong's one win in that stretch was a questionable win as well against Chito Vera. But yeah, I mean, I'm on the Casey Kenny side here. I think we agree again, which is just crazy, but definitely the better performances as of late. High volume, as you mentioned. Song Yadong refused to throw strikes against Kyler Phillips. Meanwhile, we see Casey Kenny landing 123 6 strikes on Nathaniel Wood, 74 even on Dominic Cruz in a loss. So he throws volume. So I would say Casey Kenny wins this fight.
And I mean, these Asian guys, I don't know how they build these chins up over there, but it's unbelievable. Obviously, Korean Zombie's got his name for a reason outside of a crazy spinning elbow with no time left as a buzzer beater from Yair Rodriguez. I mean, Korean Zombie just eats what you throw at him. Song Yadong, for as much as I get on him about not throwing as much as he should, I mean, this dude comes out of fights looking like he got beat the hell up, and looks like he's ready to just get back in there and just keep taking a beating. These guys take a beating. I don't think this is one of those fights that's getting finished maybe later somehow. But I agree with you. I like Casey Kenny, and Casey Kenny by decision. That's plus 150. I think that's a big enough juice difference that you can obviously bet him straight up if you want, but I also like that Kenny by decision plus 150. I don't know if there's necessarily anything else to go over on this fight. Was there anything else that this is kind of one of those where, you know, 2 guys that can throw, like to throw, both guys. I mean, Casey Kenny's never been finished, I don't think. 2 very durable guys at this bantamweight level. Anything else in this fight?
Yeah, I mean, I was just gonna say Song Yadong is super young, has a future in the division, but it's just not his time yet here.
And I think that's also where we see people, and this is something that I've run into, because obviously I wouldn't say I was a casual fan before the pandemic, because obviously I was watching almost every single card and into it, but I wasn't a crazy diehard. Let me go back and watch every single fight of the fighters before and like truly analyze and go through it. But a lot of the people that have come into UFC during this pandemic, they've seen a lot of times where guys will lose 2, maybe 3 times, and the UFC just cuts them. The thing that I explained to them is it all depends on where you are in your career. Song Yadong's not a 32-year-old who's been here and his 35th fight. Song Yadong, like you said, he's a young guy. He's a guy that can lose. If he loses this, he's not getting cut, or if he does, if Dana White cut him after one loss here, I mean, he'd be picked up by Bellator or PFL in half a second. But these are the kind of guys I think you've talked about, that there are certain guys that we say, or females that are fighting for their jobs, maybe have a loss or 2 in a row. ones that have been here for a while, you know, that are 30 whatever years old, and or even there are younger ones that just they're not, you know, if you just come to the UFC and you have 3 fights and you just stink in all 3 of them. But Song Yadong's proven himself in this division that at the very least can hang with some of these top 15, top 10 guys. You know, I mean, he's not at risk for losing, you know, a job, or at least I'd be stunned if he, you know, lost his fight and Dana White cut him after. I think that's kind of also the thing we have to look at, is not just, oh, he's lost, you know, he's going to lose this, he's going to lose 2 or 3 in a row, you know, it's time to cut him. I think that's what a lot of people think, and that's just obviously not necessarily the way to look at it. Anything else on that?
And just going off of that, from a business perspective, he's from an important market for the UFC as well.
Correct. And Dana White's shown that he will like to have these guys from, whether it's an Asian market or a Brazilian market or even certain parts of Europe where it may not. Obviously, we know the Russia and the former Soviet Union, all of those kind of countries, wrestling and MMA is big. Dana White's shown that he's okay having certain guys in other areas and having them because, hey, I know they bring a market in. But at the end of the day, certain sports or certain commissioners, even in the fight game, they'll keep guys forever like that. Dana White's shown that, you know, you still have to prove yourself to be in the UFC, because at the end of the day, he's not throwing scrubs out there.
Definitely.
All right, let's get into the next fight. Rafael Fiziev minus 300. Bobby Green, the decision machine. He is plus 250. This is a lightweight fight. Quickly, I'll just kind of go over what my quick notes were on watching the past couple fights. Fiziev, the most impressive thing to me was that last fight he had off of Rafael Moicano. That was a round 1 finish he had towards the end of the first round. It was good for me because obviously he had that first round finish. That's always good. But he took a couple shots. He ate a couple shots from a guy from Moicano who can throw, has some power, definitely for sure. Moicano, I think, I know for sure 1 takedown got stuffed. I'm pretty sure there was 2 or 3 that he went after that had gotten stuffed in that fight. Good for me to see that a guy like Fiziev, who has some power, was able to eat a couple shots, stuff a takedown, and finish off Moicano. That's kind of what I have on his last fight. And then Bobby Green, 12, I mean, what are you going to say? 12 of his last 13 fights have went to a decision. The thing that I like about, I don't want to say like, but the thing that is interesting about Bobby Green is he's fought guys that I'm not going to say are bad strikers, but these aren't guys that are 1 finish knockout power, which we've shown that Fiziev has that ability to knock somebody out. When you look at some of these guys, obviously guys that are good strikers, but Moises Allen Patrick, Lando Venata, Clay Guida, guys that are not bad strikers. I mean, these guys aren't bad strikers, but none of these guys are 1 shot knockout kind of power. So I do think this is the first time in a while Bobby Green's going to face somebody that has that. If he catches you, your eyes are closed and whatever. But Bobby Green, 12 of his last 13 have went to a decision. He is the decision machine. As a plus 250 underdog here, how do you see this fight going, KMS?
I mean, Bobby Green is the most frustrating fighter on planet Earth to watch. I mean, I was on him in that last Thiago Moises fight. I personally thought he won it, but he just fights a style to where he just stops for a minute in a round and then just loses it. Frustrating as all hell. That being said, I do have Fiziev in this fight. Not sure if he knocks him out or not, but Bobby Green, as we mentioned, decision machine. But yeah, I got Rafael Fiziev here. I know it's not the sexy underdog pick, but gotta go with the favorite here.
And I think that's obviously when we're talking about picking these minus 300 favorites, we're not betting them outright. You know, there's these guys you're going to throw into parlays or look at certain props if you're going to try and figure out how to bet them. I think Fiziev's a good parlay piece. I think he's definitely a candidate for sure. As Cody Saftik likes to call, as the apple pie shitter. I think there's definitely a chance that he tires out at some point and Bobby Green takes over the second half of round 2, wins round 3, and in Texas, who knows how that decision goes. But this is one of those other fights that I do think is a good way to bet this, is you can throw him, like I said, in some parlays. But Fiziev inside the distance is plus 190. And then Bobby Green, if you're going to bet him at plus 250, you bet him by decision. He's plus 425 to win a decision. I mean, if you're betting Bobby Green, you have to bet him by decision. Anything else on this fight? I know we're kind of getting, when you get the further down the card you get, I'll say there's, the less obviously this is still a great card, and these fights are better than the co-main we had last week.
Oh my God.
But, as we get further down this card, obviously there is, it's not the Lewis Gane fight. It's not even an Aldo Munoz kind of fight. So obviously there's a little less to kind of go over the excitement, I guess, on it. Is there anything else you'd add to that?
Nothing else I would add for that fight. Yeah.
All right, then we can get into the next one on the card is a bantamweight fight. Dead pick a -110 both ways. Vince Morales, Draco Rodriguez. So I've got a couple of notes, and I'll go through these like I did last time. Morales, I'm sure a lot of people are going to watch him fight and have the exact same thing. I mean, this dude, if he learned how to fight, he could be good, because he's just a guy where it's like he's got some talent. You see him do certain things, and then it's like, well, I'm going to strike with a striker. I'm going to try and take down a grappler. It's like he's like the guy that, like, growing up when you were in like elementary school or like in middle school, was like the kid that always, like, you were trying to run up a hill, but this kid's like, no, I'm going to run up the bigger hill. Like, always trying to make it harder on himself. That's how he fights. I mean, it's just like you strike the grapplers and you take down the strikers. I mean, that's kind of the key to victory. That's kind of how, for the most part, you win. That's not what he does. And the thing that I think is the way that he fights, he doesn't care about his legs. He throws his legs out there, and they are there to be kicked. The instep, the outstep, that thigh, the knee, wherever you want to kick him, both his legs are always there, and you can kick him. Obviously, Chris Gutierrez was his last fight. He finished it with a leg kick. But Morales, I think, has been knocked down once or twice before that with leg kicks. Throws those legs out there. The interesting thing about Draco Rodriguez to me is he lost his UFC debut. I'm going to get this out. Lost his UFC debut to Zahabi, which Morales has 3 losses in his last 4 fights. Zahabi was the 1 win for Morales. And Zahabi finished Rodriguez in the first round there. What are your thoughts on this fight?
Yeah, 2 guys we talked about earlier, guys fighting for their jobs in the UFC. This might be a situation where both guys are actually fighting for their jobs here. So like you mentioned, Vince Morales, an idiot in the octagon, to say the least. I mean, he fights the exact opposite way that he should fight in every single fight. If he could learn something from that, he has the talent to pull off a win. But yeah, this fight is a greasy fight to pick. Don't really have a lean either way here, but I'm going to take a bet anyways. So I'll probably bet that Vince Morales learned something here and take him.
So I think the interesting thing to think about on a fight like this, where there are certain things that you can learn from their past fights, but with a guy like Vince Morales, you just don't know what he's going to do. So it's like you can try and learn from it, or you can be like, okay, what are the facts do I know? What facts do I know? You can guess at all of these different things that you see, but what facts do I know? And there's one fact that I know. Draco Rodriguez was knocked out by Zahabi. That is a fact. However you want to argue it, that is a fact. So if I can take that fact and say, okay, what conclusion can I draw from that? Whether it's true or not, it may not be true after this fight, but until this fight it's true, you can build your own kind of narrative. So my thought is, okay, I'm going to take Morales inside the distance plus 300. Has he shown an ability to really finish people? Not really. But I'm just going to go with maybe Draco Rodriguez is chinny. We don't know he's not chinny. Obviously, we've talked about this with Zahabi. Zahabi has some sort of power, but he's not one of those guys where it's like just completely cold cocks people. So that's kind of the way that I look at this fight. Is Morales inside the distance plus 300? I think that's a good bet, because it's just, hey, you're hoping Rodriguez is chinny. And maybe after this fight, Rodriguez goes 3 rounds with him, and Rodriguez is able to take a couple shots that he throws. And it's like, okay, this guy isn't chinny. He just got caught last time. It happens. It's MMA. Plenty of times a guy gets caught, knocked out, and then they come back, and it's, their chin's never an issue again. And I think the other way you can bet that as well is if you were trying to put 2 bets on this fight, the other way you can do it is, okay, if that happens, then I like Draco Rodriguez by decision plus 220. So I think those are 2 bets you can look at here. Morales inside the distance plus 300, Draco Rodriguez by decision plus 220. What are your thoughts on those?
Yeah, I hate to agree with you again here, but yeah, Vince Morales, we haven't seen much of Draco Rodriguez in the octagon, and that's the problem here. I mean, we saw him on Contender Series. He got a super quick sub and then got knocked out by Zahabi. So literally all we have seen is that he got knocked out is that he got knocked out quickly. So, and Vince Morales obviously survived any power that Zahabi had, won by decision. So, gotta lean that side.
All right, let's get to the next fight. It is a light heavyweight fight. Alonzo Menifield, one of the guys that had arguably, when he came into the division, people thought maybe one of the higher ceilings of one of the newcomers when he came in. Obviously hasn't panned out as well. Still a decent fighter. He is minus 250, fights Ed Herman, plus 200. Obviously different points of their career. Ed Herman, the older, more experienced fighter. Alonzo Menifield is 10-2. He's got 12 fights. I think the key with him is there's one decision in his last 12 fights. All 10 of his wins have been by finish, 8 knockouts, 2 submissions, basically all in the first round. The only 2 finishes that he had were not in the first round, were in round 2. They were at like 28 and 32 seconds. So basically, right at the beginning of round 2. Menifield is a guy that usually it's going to get finished fast. He comes at you hard. If he hits you, he's got power. He's a guy that can tire. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing that Ed Herman's on a 3-fight win streak at this stage. I didn't even think that. I just logged on to today to Tapology, and I was like, whoa, he has actually won 3 fights in a row here. Like, I mean, Mike Rodriguez should have gotten finished. I mean, we had the situation there with the illegal strike that wasn't really an illegal strike, and Ed Herman passed it off as one and got away with it, and then ended up outlasting him. But yeah, I mean, my thoughts here. Alonzo Menifield should win early, I think, as you mentioned, that is his path in the past. Ed Herman has shown a propensity to get finished. He's gotten finished by Krylov. He's gotten finished by Derek Brunson, which is obviously a whole nother level. But yeah, I would say I'm leaning Menifield early.
So Menifield, I agree. Menifield round 1 is plus 200. Menifield round 1 by TKO or knockout is plus 250. I think there's a chance you do that. You can also bet Menifield inside the distance. I think that's like minus 110. I think that's pretty much a pick 'em, something like that. But I think the other thing is if Ed Herman survives the first round and he looks fairly like his head's still on his shoulders, I think there's a chance you could get Ed Herman. He's already a plus 200. If he loses that first round, you could be looking at 4, 5, 6-1, something like that. If Menifield dominates round 1, and Menifield's shown a propensity that if he doesn't get that finish early, it's not necessarily coming. I think that's kind of how you look at this: is Menifield round 1 plus 200 or round 1 by knockout plus 250, or an Ed Herman live bet, after round 1. All right. Anything else on that fight?
Nope.
All right, let's get on to what is next. I've got
Carolina and Penne.
Yep, Carolina Kowalkiewicz against Jessica Penne. I will give you my notes on this fight, and it is simple. Carolina's lost 4 in a row. Penne's lost 3 of 4, and I wrote good luck.
Yeah, I mean that's essentially where we're at here. It just really depends on how motivated Carolina is in my mind, because she had that 4-fight losing streak and then she retired. Just after that last fight there, she was fighting some of the top of the division. I mean, Jessica Andrade, Michelle Waterson, but then kind of took a dip there with Grasso and Yan Janan. But obviously Yan Janan's risen up from then. But it just depends on how motivated she is. I think she's the better fighter, but at the same time, already retired, coming back out. What's her motivations here? Is it she's fighting because she needs money, or is she fighting because she wants to?
And I think the key for me is that even like if Carolina's 75% of what we've seen from her, I still think that is a chance that's good enough to beat Jessica Penne. This isn't a fight. I don't know if I'll have an outright bet or anything on it. But I think if you're going to bet it, I do think you pay the minus 125, minus 130, and just hope you're betting on a fighter that at both of their primes was very clearly the better fighter. You're betting on the fact that she's here because she wants to fight. She wants to be a part of this. And I think at the end of the day, it's just like I said, if you don't know what to make of a fight, it's almost like golf. Like if you don't know which way the putt goes, just hit it at the hole. In MMA, if you don't know how to analyze a fight, basically on a pick 'em, just pick who you think is the better fighter, whether at this point of their career at whatever point of their career. If it's a pick 'em, you're just looking at it and be like, okay, you know what? This girl at her best is better than this girl at her best, and I think that's kind of have to analyze it, right?
Yeah, that's what I got too. Are we gonna agree with each other on everything here? There's got to be something deep that we get in a little debate on. But once again,
I think the next fight we've reached it. I think this is where we'll differ. So we get into the next fight. It is Manel Kopp minus 200, Odie Osborne plus 175. Obviously, Osborne coming off that Jerome Rivera first round knockout. Kopp is coming off the losses to Nicolau, which was a split decision. That was a close loss. I think you could argue the Kopp won that fight. And then his UFC debut, I believe, was against Alexander Pantoja. Tough spot to be. I mean, Pantoja is one of those guys that if that's your first fight in the UFC, it's like, obviously they've got some hope for you. They're not throwing you against a scrub. If Pantoja's your first fight, he lost that, but it was a decision, went the whole way. Kopp's one of those guys. He's a rising superstar. He's got the last 3 wins there were KOs. They were impressive KOs. It's what he does. Odie Osborne's coming off that first round finish, and then he's coming off a submission loss to Brian Kelleher before that. How do you see this fight going?
Yeah, an interesting note on Odie Osborne as well. It's his first fight down at 125, so this will definitely be a fight to where you have to watch the weigh-ins. But I mean, his last fight was actually at 145, I believe. So now he's coming all the way down to 125. But yeah, I mean, I believe in the hype for Manel Kopp. I mean, tough draw to start off in Pantoja. Somehow, I believe he was a slight favorite against Pantoja, right? Because I was just hammering that Pantoja line, but
I know it was close.
I was shocked to see a guy coming in making his UFC debut on that matchup, but it was a close fight. 2 super close fights against guys that are against Pantoja, and then a fringe top 15 guy in Nicolau versus Odie Osborne. I mean, the level of competition he's been fighting isn't necessarily the same here. He got finished by Brian Kelleher, and that was up a division as well. I mean, gotta watch weigh-ins, but I'm definitely on Cap either way, I think.
So here's how I knew we were going to be different, because I bet a prop and you don't bet props. This is, as of now, like you said, we've got to look at the weigh-ins and see how everything goes. But as of now, one of my favorite bets on this card, fight to not go the decision, is minus 110 here. I think these are 2 guys that we've seen. Kopp obviously has those decisions the past 2 times, but against guys that I think they were the classier fighter, I would say, and they was kind of fighting more of their fight. He showed a little, didn't want to throw as much as he probably could have. Obviously, he's got that crazy knockout history coming from Ryzen. Odie Osborne, he's past 2 fights here, obviously, both early finishes. Like you talked about, it wasn't a different weight class, so we do need to see how he looks on the scales. But even if, it's a tough weight cut for him, even that makes it more that, hey, he's not going to go 15 minutes. And I like that at minus 110. It's basically a pick 'em. I think that's a great bet. And if I like that, Kopp inside the distance is plus 200 and Osborne inside the distance is plus 450. You could bet them both and make money on both of them. That's how I like this fight. Anything else?
That's it from that fight.
All right, let's get on. We are getting to the final 3 fights of the card. Miles Johns minus 200, Anderson Dos Santos plus 160. This was booked at least one time before. It didn't happen. It's a bantamweight fight. This is kind of the point of the card where we're getting to some of these guys where there's maybe not as much out there. Obviously, I don't want to say there's not much out there because there's definitely plenty of film of Miles Johns. But just guys that aren't at the top of their division at this point of their careers at least. Miles Johns minus 200, Anderson Dos Santos plus 160. How do you see this fight going, and who wins this?
Yeah, I've randomly been super high on Miles Johns. He was just one of those guys that, when you watch a fight on the Contender Series and you're just like, that guy's going to be great, but then nobody else is talking about him. So you feel like kind of a hipster on him. So you keep riding him. That's been me with Miles Johns so far. Obviously he got knocked the hell out by Mario Batista, but other than that, he's looked pretty good in his other 2 fights against the UFC. Obviously, pretty low level competition, but I'm definitely leaning the Miles Johns side. Not leaning. I love the Miles Johns side here, but it is minus 205 straight up. So you probably do have to look at a few props if you wanna bet him.
So once again, this is another fight. Fight doesn't go to decision, plus 150. I don't necessarily love it as much as the prior fight, but I think at plus 150, I think there's some good value there. There are definitely certain Miles Johns props you can bet inside the distance. But I also think there's a chance that Miles Johns tires towards the end of the fight. And if that happens, Santos in round 2 and Santos in round 3 are plus 1,600, plus 2,000. I think those are, maybe some flyers with a chance to throw on that. If you're picking Miles Johns to win, how does he win?
Probably by decision, by wrestling a bit, getting some output going. But I think Miles Johns by decision is the most probable outcome here.
So if that's what you like, at minus 200, plus 140 for him to win by decision. So obviously that's a way that you can bet it and take away that minus 200 juice if that's how you obviously think that you're gonna bet it. Go ahead. Sorry, I cut you off.
Yeah, no. You're right on the mat. I was about to read the Miles Johns by decision line, and you beat me to it there. So
there, we disagree on that fight. You have Miles Johns by decision. I have it not going the distance and potentially Dos Santos later in the fight. Although I do think even if it finishes inside the distance, Miles Johns still the more likely winner. But obviously we talked about with the Santos later props, 16, 20 to 1. Those are just props you take a flyer and hope that something hits with those. All right. Speaking of the bottom of the card, as we were talking about before this fight, this is the fight where I don't even have the other fight. At least when I had nothing to say, I at least had Carolina had lost 4 in a row. Penny had lost 3 or 4, and I had good luck. This I'll show you my sheet. There's literally, I wrote the fight and there's just nothing on it.
So we talked about this.
So I'll go over it real quick. Victoria Leonardo minus 110, Melissa Gatto minus 110. It's a women's flyweight fight. Go ahead and talk about it for as long as you want.
So I messaged you earlier. I was like, I have something on every fight except this one, but I came up with something for this fight.
I'm gonna go with you on whatever you say. So let's do it.
So Gatto's last win, it was 3 years ago, but it was against Carol Rosa. And we all know that name. She's one of the rising stars in the division right now. She subbed her. But another thing as well here, she did have a 3-year layoff. But one thing about young fighters that have had long layoffs recently, they have all came back better from it. There were a few examples of that. Like, what was that guy who fought Rodrigo Nascimento that just knocked him to smithereens and was on like a 5-year layoff?
I'm not gonna come up with his name if I don't look it up. But I know exactly. That was what? How long ago was that?
That was a few months ago.
Who was that? My internet's not even loading. Was that? Who was that? I can't remember who he beat. Did he beat Alan Badeau? Chris Dawkins? I know he fought Chris Dawkins. He lost to Chris Dawkins.
We're gonna spend forever trying to find it, but that was one of the examples I've had.
Stream.
Young guy with 5-year layoff ended up looking at a lot better from it. Melissa Gatto, undefeated, win against Carol Rosa, 3-year layoff. She's now 25 years old. I'm leaning the Gatto side just off that trend alone. I know, like you said, there's not much on either fighter, but just based on that trend, I'm going Gatto.
I mean, I've got literally nothing else to add to that, and like I said, this is one of those fights where it's like I'm not even gonna pretend to give an opinion because I don't have an opinion either way. It's obviously a close fight with pick 'em both ways. You like Gatto minus 110, that means I like Gatto minus 110. So that's what I'm going to roll with. Let's put that down. And then we get to I'll say the final fight of the card, but it's really the first fight of the card since we went through this card backwards. Johnny Munoz Jr. minus 250, Jamie Simmons plus 200. This is a bantamweight fight. I'll let you give your thoughts, and then I'll kind of give my thoughts after.
Yeah, the only thing we have on Simmons in the UFC at least was getting head kicked to smithereens by Giga Chikadze, but that's on short notice.
Tough spot to be thrown in, and here's Giga.
Oh yeah, UFC debut, short notice. Here's an animal, but But yeah, also the only thing we have is a loss from a controversial loss for Munoz as well against Nate Maness. But um, I I really don't have much on this fight, if I was going to be honest. If I was leaning away, it would be Johnny Munoz by knockout.
So yeah, I mean, I agree. I think if I'm going to analyze this fight, I think Munoz's path to victory is to take Simmons down, finish him that way. I think that is Munoz's best path to victory. I'm not necessarily going with a side at these odds. Munoz may be in a parlay or two. Obviously, have to see how weigh-ins look and go out of that. But fight to not go the distance is minus 130. I think that's a good fight. I mean, that's a good bet. And then Munoz inside the distance is plus 130. And then if I think his best path to victory is on the ground, then Munoz by sub is plus 200. So those are kind of the ways that I may attack that. Obviously, like we said, we're recording this on Thursday, so we've still got weigh-ins tomorrow, and then you've got basically 2.5 full days till this card starts, or 2 full days because it gets to the middle of Saturday.
Yeah, we might have COVID cancellations. You never know these days.
Why does UFC have all these COVID cancellations, but Bellator doesn't? Does Bellator just not care?
That's actually a really good question. I don't know, or maybe we just don't hear about the Bellator COVID cancellations because it comes in undercard fights and
yeah, but like UFC has them like day of.
I know. I think they're definitely doing more stringent testing than Bellator is. Bellator also has, I believe they're still doing a bubble type situation where you got to be there like 10 days before. And
I'm sure UFC's insurance policy on their fighters is much higher than Bellator's insurance policies on their fighters, just, because of the levels of these promotions. Was there anything we didn't go over, or any bets that you like, or any final thoughts before we kind of wrap this thing up?
I think we're good to wrap it up here. If I had a favorite straight bet on the straight money line bet on the card here, it would probably be Michael Chiesa. But what's your favorite straight bet on the card here?
I think as of now, it's that fight to not go the distance. I'm trying to look through, see if there's anything else I really would put on that right now. But I think as I look at it, that Cop Osborne to not go the distance minus 110, I think it'll pick him. That's just great value. We had a couple people ask. We can go over Prize Picks real quick. I know I just kind of have it up. I don't really play Prize Picks as much. I know you don't either. Just kind of looking at it. It's all about how you think the fights are going to go. If you think Gane dominates Lewis for 3, 4, 5 rounds, he should have those significant strikes, that control time. He should be able to rack up those points. He's at 107.5. I think there's still a chance that Gane could hit that over and Lewis could still knock him out at some point, because there's a chance that Gane can piece him up for a while, even on the ground. And Lewis always lands that one shot. As I'm looking through it, there's really not much here that I love. I know it's kind of, whatever. Alonzo Menafield, if you're betting him round one finish, he's at 100.5. So obviously a round one finish is 100 points. So a significant strike, even if he lands one, a significant strike, knockdown, and the finish, that's where that lands. Anything not necessarily for you specific fighters for Prize Picks, but is there any fighters that you think just the way they fight could be a potential good Prize Picks or DFS play this week?
Just the way they fight. I mean, Pedro Munoz definitely on output alone. I'm actually looking at the DraftKings prices right now because that'll give me the best basis here. Where is he actually? Pedro Munoz is only 7,600 on DraftKings. I think that's the best value you're going to find there.
I agree. I think that's definitely definitely a good bet, because we talked about when he likes to put it on you, he puts it on you.
All right, and then Derek Lewis 6,800 for the punt.
Yeah, that's you're just hoping he lands that Lewis shot at some point. But I think we've kind of gone over this card top to bottom. We're going to kind of get ready and get out of here. But I know you don't do as much on Twitter in terms of posting stuff. Obviously, we're going to be Kyle and one of our other buddies, JP. He's going to be doing the NFL podcast with us in the fall. So obviously there will be some more. But let people know what your Twitter is and where people can find you, and where you're yelling about Manchester United and the Islanders.
Yeah, you could find me yelling about United and the Islanders at K Mastoloni. You'll also see me put some UFC stuff on there from time to time. Not really posting as much on there because it's more of a personal account, but yeah, that's where you can find me.
And yeah, make sure, obviously, for those that are new here and haven't followed any of my stuff, obviously we post everything on the website, betwithbommel.com. You follow me on Twitter, Gambling DFS Tips on Twitter. If you're not in our free Discord, make sure you join our free Discord. We've got all DFS sports from football to NASCAR to MMA, basketball, baseball, soccer, all of that. Plus, we've got our own betting section. It's a great Discord, so for anybody that's not a part of it, make sure you guys join that. That link is in my profile. And yeah, make sure you're following me, like I said, on Twitter, Gambling DFS Tips, because things can change, especially with UFC and the weigh-ins and all of that. Thank you guys for listening. Like I said, we'll call this episode 2 of season 2 of Chasing Winners. Make sure stay on the lookout for, we've got, 3 more pay-per-views this year, maybe? I think there's 3 more pay-per-views, or 4. There might be 4.
So we have the odd one. UFC 267, it sounds like, is actually going to be on free TV,
right,
but
which is weird.
It's such a good card that it's more than pay-per-view quality. It's super card quality, pretty much. So
yeah, we've got a couple more cards, whether pay-per-view or should be pay-per-view and aren't pay-per-view. Kyle and I will try and get those podcasts done. We try and do a UFC podcast for any UFC numbered fights. So none of these like Fight Nights or Vegas or ESPN fights. These, like we said, UFC 265. Even if it's 267 is not going to be a pay-per-view, obviously we'll try and get one done for that. We'll have football, NFL stuff coming up in the season. We'll have that podcast, like I said, plus I'll have articles on my website every single week, potentially doing a college football podcast as well, even if it's just later in the week, going over some bets and some thoughts. But like I said, thank you guys for listening. Make sure you are following me on Twitter, Gambling DFS Tips. My website is betwithbommel.com. As always, we're open to suggestions, thoughts, comments, anything like that on the YouTube. If you comment, I'll be there. I'll make sure I answer any questions or anything anybody has. And wherever you're listening, like, rate, review, subscribe, whatever they ask you to do, Apple, Spotify, Google, all of that. It all helps us because obviously we don't charge anything for this. So to keep it free, those likes and subscriptions definitely go a long way for us. So like I said, thank you guys for listening, and best of luck at UFC 265 this weekend.